Ian, let's go to our first activity, and this one I've chosen from our technical training manual that has 60 activities. This one is focused on specifically on defending, and it's played in an area that is roughly between the distance of 15 yards to 20 yards wide and anything from 25 yards or longer. We have 3 teams. Each team has 4 players. The team in the center, the white team in this instance, are the defending team, and the teams at each end, the blue team and the black team, are the attacking team. So those 2 teams work together as an 8 versus 4, and the objective is for the team in the attacking teams to combine in their area for 3 or 4 passes before exchanging the ball into the other side of the area, and for that team to maintain possession. As they do, each sequence, the transition, 2 defenders from the middle area go in and play 4 versus 2, and then when the ball transfers, the other 2 players go in and defend. So Ian, let's talk a little bit about the methodology here.
Sure. So as the coaches will appreciate, we've essentially got an 8 versus 4, but the white team can get out of the being the piggy in the middle very quickly if their defending is effective. What we see right now in this first example is we have 2 players trying to dispossess the 4. The player on the left is a little bit late to the party, and the player on the right is kind of exposed in a 2 or 3v1. So that's a little bit disappointing. The other challenge as well is that this player and this player, who cannot go and pressure but could potentially intercept the crossfield pass, have chosen to stand wide and disengaged. If they had moved into this kind of area, they could potentially steal balls, pick them off as they get played across. So initially in this first picture, some fairly ineffective tandem defending here and some inattentiveness here probably means that these 4 blues in the top of the screen will be managed to get the ball down to the 4 blacks in the bottom.
Thanks, Ian. Let's go to the second diagram for the second sequence. And in this activity, we're going to just follow the sequence after the initial 4 passes has been made by the blue team. And now they've transferred the ball across to the other zone, the other end zone, to their attacking teammates. Now, what you'll notice, a couple of things here. Firstly, that we have prevented the white team from intercepting the ball as it's passed from one end zone to the other, the 2 players that are in the middle zone. So that gives the opportunity for that transition to occur. Secondly, as that ball does transfer, the 2 players that were waiting in the area now transition into the other end zone and start to defend, and the players that were defending now move back into the middle zone. So Ian, let's talk about some of the methodology here.
Sure. Before I do that, I'd just like to address a question that came in from Kurt about the movement or lack of movement of the groups of 4 in possession. It's a great question. It's not our focus for the topic, but of course you need the 4 attackers, the 8 attackers to be performing to challenge the defenders. So my answer, Kurt, is you might start off by putting more pressure on the attackers, by putting a 3rd defender in possibly. But what I would also say is if you look at these 4 blacks, they have set themselves up in good ready positions, high on the grid and wide in the grid. So this group of 4, I think, are in good position. But you have to find a way to pressure them to move if they're being a little bit lazy. But back to the defending. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the blues have been successful. They've switched the point of attack. I'm going to look at these 2 players who have failed to prevent the switch and make sure that they are now starting to recover back to the center area to be on deck to defend again. It's important that once they've potentially failed, they don't just give up. So that's the first thing I'm looking at. The next thing I'm looking at is the quality of this run in to press the ball, and are these 2 players working together? In the example we see here, I would say they're not. They're both sort of just running in willy-nilly. And what we would actually want is to see one player clearly designate themselves as pressing the ball and on the basis of that pressure, the second one coming over to provide cover. And so this would become now more of a 2v2 as opposed to a 4v2, because the two are working together to eliminate passing options for the black. So I think there are better ways than the two players are currently diagrammed to set up the initial defense here.
Now let's go to the third sequence, and as play develops here, we can see that the black player who received the ball attempts a pass to their teammate, but due to the pressure that is initially played by the first defender, the pass is not quite as good as we would hope, and the play has become very predictable. So the second defender has managed to slide in, win possession, and then exchange passes with his teammate or her teammate, and then pass the ball back into the central area. So we added a condition here that once the white team have won possession, they must pass the ball back into the middle area to their teammates in order to create the transitional moment. So Ian, let's talk a little bit about some of the methodology we can adopt here.
Sure. And again, just to quickly address a question from Stephanie as to only having 8 players attend training. Stephanie, there are ways to do it with 8 players, but respectfully, you'd have to have a lot of experience. So I would save this activity for at least 9 players to have the emphasis of the 2 defenders and still have your rotation. I think 8 would be stretching it. It's possible, but it would be, that's for a whole nother presentation, but a good question. So to the defending, I can see now that these 2 players have engaged, they have remembered what they're doing, they've got back to the center, and now of course they're ready to receive a pass should their teammates win it. So well done to these 2. What I really like now from the 2 that are putting the pressure on is if this player here had made the run at the ball from there, they probably would have made the black player play fast. However, because they've curved their run, we can see this curved run back to the ball, they've been able to get round and get to the front to apply effective pressure. That effective pressure has encouraged their teammate to make a curved run to come in and cover. And what you see now in this bottom part of the screen is we've got a 2v2, and this player and this player are essentially out of the activity because of the effectiveness of the white defending. And then the effectiveness of the white defending is such that they actually win the ball, and then they play the ball out, they transition. So now the black team will go in to be the defenders, and the white team becomes part of the possession group. So a really nice picture here of how effective this activity can be when done well.
And obviously for a coach who's working with their players, they'll have to determine how successful the conditions are that they start with, and then they can modify from there. One of the modifications certainly a coach can make is by making the area bigger. And by doing that, but normally, traditionally, if you make the area bigger, it puts more challenge on the defenders and obviously gives the advantage to the attackers, because they have to now the defenders have to now cover more space. So that's one adaptation that you could certainly make to help the attackers if the defenders are having a great deal of success. Equally, if you are finding it very challenging for the attackers to gain the number of passes they need to make, you can add in less defenders. You could remove a defender and just go with one defender to begin with. Of course, you can also add more attackers to the space as well. So there's a few ideas that we would like to share with you, and I appreciate everyone's involvement today. Just a reminder, if you are interested in joining some of our social media, we have many opportunities, and the activity discussion after this session will be taken to our LinkedIn group, where you'll have the opportunity to have all of the questions answered that we didn't get a chance to do so today. So from Ian and I appreciate your time. Thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you join us on the next Give and Go.